Now, 1993 was definitely a comeback year for Sylvester Stallone, with both Cliffhanger and Demolition Man just killing it at the box office. He'd follow those films up with 1994's The Specialist alongside Sharon Stone. Stallone was the king of action, Stone was the queen of the 90s erotic thriller, and that's the odd blend of genres that this strange movie delivers. It's ultra cheesy, routinely cringy, and it's bad, but I'm still not sure if it's actually so bad that it's good. So let's get into it. What's happening out there, everybody? Thank you, as always, for stopping by the channel. I'm Anthony DeJoya, and if you're new here, welcome to Movies Never Say Die. This is your one-stop shop for 80s and 90s retro reviews and videos, and today we're diving into a doozy. Now, I love Sylvester Stallone. He's my all-time favorite actor, but I can definitely admit that Sly's delivered some stinkers over his legendary career. The Specialist really rides closely to that line, but I'm still unsure if it's actually one of them. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the plot to this one, get ready because it's a fun one. Stallone plays Ray Quick. He's a retired explosive expert for the CIA that now works solo as a hitman using conveniently custom-shaped explosives to kill only his targets. Sharon Stone's Mae Monroe hires him to kill the crime syndicate that killed her parents. Through Quick's conversations with Monroe, he becomes quickly captivated by her story, captivated by her, and conveniently this same crime syndicate's connection with Quick's past will also make this mission personal. Now, this all may sound a bit messy, and it really is, but when you think about it, with the proper tone, the proper layering to the story, the right amount of character dynamics, some sturdy motivations woven in, and some good action tossed in to cut the emotional tension, that I think there is potential for a compelling film here. The Specialist, on the other hand, delivers really none of that, and it's just one of those odd movies from the 90s that's kind of modestly fun to revisit because they really just don't make these wild blends of movies that much anymore. Now, Stallone was definitely riding off the momentum of 1993, and action movies are always popular. Sharon Stone was the name in erotic thrillers after starring in Basic Instinct and Sliver, and really that genre was just at a peak of popularity during the 90s, but they were just an odd pairing in this movie that didn't work. But honestly, there were a lot of things in this movie that didn't work. The plot and the characters are shallow across the board. The scoring from the usually great John Barry is comically overbearing, and the forced erotic undercurrent to everything is extremely laughable. But I mean, The Specialist is also a movie that's sort of fun to go back and laugh at as you watch it just take itself way too seriously in working through this odd blend of tones and these ridiculous story beats.
Are you close enough to walk over?
It delivers a charming Miami backdrop as Stallone is making bombs like MacGyver. James Woods and Eric Roberts are awesome additions, but the montages, my God, the ridiculous montages are just too much in this movie, highlighted by the karate yoga scene between Stallone and Stone. I mean, this is unintentional comedy at its finest, unless she just so happens to be standing on an air hockey table.
It's gotten so I can feel you.
It's all part of the work.
Do you think about me? I think about you.
But like I said, I enjoyed the supporting cast here. I think James Woods just steals this movie with a completely self-aware performance. Eric Roberts is textbook sleaze. He looks like he's having a lot of fun in this role, maybe too much. Roberts plays Tomas, the son of a crime boss, who is just played up to amusing levels by Rod Steiger, who goes all in on his performance. Roberts plays Tomas, his son, and in this story, as ridiculous as it sounds, he is to have killed Monroe's parents in front of her when she was a little girl. The problem with that logic is Eric Roberts and Sharon Stone are only 2 years apart in age, so the absurdity of this movie stretched out into the casting choices as well. And oddly enough, back in '93, the LA Times listed The Specialist as the best unproduced script in the thriller genre. This was based on a poll of 40 producers, studio execs, and directors, but I mean, a complete lack of chemistry between Stallone and Stone and the forced sexual tone being much more laughable than seductive prevented this movie from even coming close to sticking its intended landing. And I do think most of the issues in this movie absolutely stem from the heavy-handed direction of Luis Llosa. He's trying so hard to make this a sensual film, and it feels like a comically bad music video at times, trying desperately to be erotic, but not knowing at all what sexy is. Rennie Harlan and Mario Van Peebles were also in talk to direct this one, as were the Hughes brothers, but at that time, Steven Seagal was in talks to be the star of the film, so they turned it down. Then when Stallone came on board, he really liked David Fincher as the director, but it was still only 94. Fincher was at the time still dealing with fallouts from a failed Alien 3 the year earlier, and his career wouldn't really take off until a year after The Specialist was released, when his massive hit 7 would come out. So The Specialist did have some issues landing a director. It seems Stallone wasn't even fully committed to this film. It's been reported the producers threatened to replace him with Warren Beatty if he didn't fully dive into this role and this project. It's also been reported that once he was committed, Stallone demanded that some of James Woods' scene be cut and that some of his scenes be reshot so that he could get more screen time to keep Woods' performance from stealing the spotlight, which was something that seemed to be a pattern for Stallone, because he did the same thing to Rutger Hauer when he was filming Nighthawks. With cast and crew in place, The Specialist was shot from March to May of '94 out in Florida and Tennessee. It would drop into theaters on October 7th, taking the #1 spot with a $14.3 million haul. The budget for this movie was $45 million, and it would go on to pull in $57.3 domestically, with global sales pulling it up to $170.3 million. So it was a financial success despite its blatant flaws. But again, this was the 90s. It was a simpler time when people just really went out to the movies to watch anything. Critics didn't have their Stallone goggles on because they skewered this movie. Yet, like I said earlier, I think there was potential for a good film here, but the cheesy, heavy-handed direction and the superficial emotional layering completely get in the way. You can actually see glimpses of a decent action movie in here when Woods is trying to catch Stallone, but outside of that, the positives are slim. The comically bad romantic angle and the change-up of scoring every time it comes up is like a light switch turning on the sappiness. And Sharon Stone, to her credit, she tries to play the role as tough as she can, and it actually does briefly show itself during slight moments of the film here and there, but the writing just pigeonholes her so deep into the victim corner that there's really nothing she can do other than being a plot device and a sexual object. So when you cut that with action sequences that are too few and far between, the intended intrigue never lands. The bomb sequences are cool, and they even shoehorned a bus fight for Stallone to give him something to do, but it's just not enough to save this movie. Stallone's more focused on doing karate yoga with his Discman and talking in phone booths and sulking around and sliding around on the shower floor with Sharon Stone than he is interested in kicking ass and being an action star, and this movie definitely needed more of him kicking ass and being an action star, not trying to be the lead in an erotic thriller like Bruce Willis or Michael Douglas and then trying to cut that movie with an action film. And speaking of Michael Douglas, I have one last fun fact for The Specialist before we grade this thing and call it a day. For the famous sex scene, Stallone said that he didn't actually want to do the scene because at the time of filming, Stone wasn't cooperating. She didn't want to take her robe off. She said she was tired of all the nudity in her career. Stallone reassured her that the scene would be tasteful and that he wouldn't take any liberties. I'm not really sure what that means, but she still wasn't into it. This is when Stallone said he went down to his trailer to grab a bottle of Black Death vodka that was gifted to him by Michael Douglas, and that after about a half a dozen shots each, in his words, he and Stone were wet and wild on the shower floor. And after all the efforts and after all of their drinking, the scene was completed, and the result was one goofy-ass love scene that did absolutely nothing for the film it was in. And in the end, The Specialist does deliver some final act explosions and a charismatic performance from James Woods, but very little else. The many flaws in this movie, though, I think are kind of fun to go back and chuckle at after all the years. It's a movie that shows not all stars go together, and that some genres like action and erotic thriller do not blend well when the director has the sexual enlightenment of a 15-year-old. So I'm going to give The Specialist a C. And that's it for today, guys. These have been my thoughts on 1994's The Specialist, one of Stallone's most unintentionally silly films. Thank you guys so much for watching. Drop me a like if you enjoyed this video. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. And until the next video, movies never say die.
Jack Burton and the Pork Chop Express, and I'm talking to whoever's listening out there.
Survive a war, you gotta become war.
I suppose we have to register you as a lethal weapon.
You trying to say Jesus Christ can't hit a curveball?